by the end of this video, you will have a full stack web API app, and we will use a front-end application, a back-end application, and a database. So we'll have 3 services. All 3 of them will be connected using Docker Compose, and we'll use many different technologies. On the front end, we will use Next.js and Tailwind CSS, and we'll use TypeScript. On the back end, we will use a Node.js application using Express as a framework, Prisma as an ORM, and also Prisma client, and JavaScript as a language. The cool part of this is that by the end of this video, you will have all the code available on GitHub in the description below, and with just one command you can spin up all the 3 services on your machine. So this is an absolutely very cool project. How will we proceed? We'll proceed with a bottom-up strategy. So this does mean that we will start from the database. We will check that the database is up and running. Then we'll proceed and create the backend. We will test the backend just to see if it does work. And then we'll create the front end. And of course, we'll dockerize the backend application, and we will dockerize the Next.js application. You can also deploy the Next.js application with Vercel if you prefer. Nice. So, the prerequisites. Which are the prerequisites to watch this video? You need Docker installed and up and running on your machine, Node.js installed and up and running on your machine, and a basic knowledge of what is a front end, what is a backend, what is an API, and what is a database. That's it. I will explain step by step, line by line, even when we will create a new folder or a new file. Optional, you can use Postman. I'll use Postman, but you can use any tool you want to test HTTP requests. I think, okay. Nice. So let's start. Okay, like this. So we'll start from here. So let's start from a clean folder. So we need a folder. So let's step in a folder. Okay, so we are here. Okay. So you can create any folder you want, and from there we will start. For example, in this case, I'll create a folder called mkdir live full stack, for example. Okay, we step into that directory, full stack, and then we can open this with any IDE we want. For example, VS Code. Okay, so first thing first, I want to initialize a Git repository. So we can do this from the command line using the command git init. And now we can create a git ignore. We need this because I want to ignore the node modules, basically. touch.gitignore. You can see here at the top. Here inside this, we will just ignore the node modules. This is to avoid that when we will do git push and we copy this project, you are using my own node modules folder. Okay, now we can create the Docker Compose file. There is a new way to, there is a new default Docker Compose files, which is called compose.yaml. So from now, probably I'll use this one. You can also name it something else, but compose.yaml is probably a good idea. Let's start from the database, and we will not install a database, but we will use, of course, Docker containers to run this Postgres database. So how can we do it? We are in the compose.yaml file, and we can define a version for this. Usually I choose 3.9, and then we can define some services. So services, ignore GitHub Copilot, we'll use the db service, and we can have a container name, db, an image name, Postgres 12. In this case, we are using an existing image. Restart always. In case we have an error, this will just spin up again automatically. And some environment variables to define the user, the password, and the database. We'll just use Postgres for all three of them. Don't do this in production. Ports 5432, 5432. It's the default Postgres port. As a volume is to have persistency in Docker containers. And you can have pg data varlib PostgreSQL -data. And then we can also define the volume that we want to create. Here we are defining the volumes we want, the volume we want to use. Here we are actually declaring the volumes, and I think we just need this. That's enough. Okay. Nice. Now let's run this Docker container based on the Postgres image. So we can do docker compose app -d, which stands for detached, so leave our terminal available, db, the name of the service, which is the only service now. And now we are pulling the Postgres image from Docker Hub, and we are spinning up this container. This is the same as downloading Postgres. You can use anything you want to test the APIs. I don't care. It's just a way to test the APIs. Okay. Nice. Something happened. The first thing that I do when I spin up any container, usually I do docker ps-a. You can also do this in different ways, but you can see here that we have the container up and running here. Now, to be sure that this is up and running, we can go here and we can do type docker exec -it. We are executing a command that we want to run inside the container. So basically this is to test that we have something in the database. Spoiler, we have nothing in our database yet. -u, which stands for user. Postgres. Okay, so we are inside the container that has pSQL. It's a way to interact with Postgres database. We can do \l. There is something inside here, but check this. If I do \dt, did not find any relations. So we have the database up and running, but it's empty. We don't even have a table. We will have one table with some inserts, and we'll see how to do this in this video. We can exit this one. And now we can start creating the backend, but the database service, the database container is already up and running. Nice, first part done. Now, for the backend, we need to create a folder. We will use a single repository here, and we will create a folder called backend. You can check here at the top right. We create this folder. We step into this folder here, and here we initialize an npm project. So we do npm init. To initialize a project, we type npm init -y, which stands for yes. Just create the project. Okay, we need 3 dependencies in this project: Express, Prisma, and Prisma client. So we can type npm I, which stands for install, Express, Prisma. Prisma is an ORM to interact with the database. In this case, we'll interact with the Postgres database. Something very cool about Prisma is that the default database that Prisma interacts with is Postgres. So this will make our life very, very easy. And we need also a Prisma client that we'll use to generate the code to interact with the database. Prisma/client. This should be okay. Will take a couple of seconds. And then the first thing that we will do is to initialize the Prisma project. So check here at the top right, because now here something will change. So to initialize the Prisma in this project, it's easy. You can just type npx Prisma init. Check here at the top right. Okay. I need to open the folder, of course. And if I open the folder here, we have a Prisma folder and a .env. I'm sorry, but I swear that this was not here. Nice. Now, the first thing that I want to do before I forget is to change this database underscore URL. We have a .env file, it's for environment variables, and of course, the Prisma doesn't know about our application, our database with these environment variables, Postgres for user, password, and DB. So we need to change it. And to do this, I can just copy paste this, so I'm sure that I don't make any typo. So instead of this, but basically here you replace your username, password, and database, the port and the host. We just use localhost here, so we'll use this from our host machine. Nice. Now, to interact with this database, we need to create a sort of table. We need a model. So usually what I do is that I want a user with an ID, auto-incremented, a name, and an email. So let's go into the schema.prisma file inside the Prisma folder, and we can define a user. Usually I have this trick with GitHub Copilot, so I type in the comment what I want, and usually GitHub Copilot makes me happy. So user with ID as int auto increment, because I don't want to assign the ID. I want the system to assign the ID. Name as a string and email as a string. Let's see. Nice. Good job by GitHub Copilot. Let's remove this. We will not do any validation here. Our goal is to focus on the dockerization part, the Docker Compose, and connecting the three services. Then the logic can be literally anything. And now we need to create the backend service. Let's check the chat 1 second. Okay, nice. One moment, let me check 1 second if we have something. Okay, nice. So now let's create our backend application. I always love this part. So we can create an index.js file here. And inside this folder, and inside this file, we need to type our application. So const express, we create an express application, require express. We need the Prisma client. So Prisma client. We define the Prisma client, and then we initialize our application. I also want to use JSON format when I parse the request, so we can do this very easily, doing app.useExpress.json. And then I want to do something very important, because the backend and the frontend application might be deployed on different services. I want to avoid any coarse problems. So app.use, I want to set some headers to avoid some coarse problems. So this is the first one. This is the second one. I will not use the patch method. And then this one, allow headers, content type. We will not use authorization in this tutorial. Nice. Now we need to actually create these APIs. So the first thing that I want to do is to test API with error 500 in case of error. Okay. Nice. No, I want to error. Let's do this again. I want basically a test endpoint so that it's not connected to the database. So let's make a test endpoint, test API. So we can do app.get. It can be test request response, and then we can do a try catch, because in case I have an error, to try catch. So in case it works, I want to return a 200 res.status 200. So all is API is working. Otherwise, I want to catch the error and return this. So if this returns an error, there is a problem with the whole system, not only the database. Now when I want to create 4 more or 5 more, now I want to create 5 more functions. So one is to get all the users. So to get all the users, now I'll show you, because this here, GitHub Copilot is correct. I want to have this app.get/users. This does mean that when I'll hit the API/users endpoint, we will see it soon, I want to return all the users. And here Prisma is super useful, because here you see here we have prisma.user, which is the model, find many, a magic method that basically does what we want. So instead of doing a select star from where, we can use this find many, because we defined this Prisma object here. Super useful, I love it. They are also done, of course, in a standard way. So this is also to avoid problems and also to interact with other people. Other people who already used Prisma, they know exactly what this does mean. And of course, these APIs will be very simple, but think having like more complicated API with relations and so on. So let's get a single user by an ID. I think this is correct. So let's read it together. So we have a /users/ID. So if we want, for example, the user number 3, we need to go on /users/3. We'll do this, of course. We have a prisma.user.findUnique, and we can use a where parameter. It is similar to the where in the select if you use just SQL commands, and we'll return this with the user. So we'll return the user, and of course it will be done as a JSON. Otherwise, we'll just return an error. Now we need just 3 more. These are you see, very standard way to do them. I don't want to get crazy here. Here I just want to do some simple and standard APIs. This is probably the most important one, because this is how we can do an insert inside a database. So on /users, it seems the same, but you see here we have app.get, so we'll use a get method. Here we have app.post, so here we can do a post request. And we don't have a password, so let's remove this. This is something that we don't need. Usually when we create a new user, we use the status 201. It usually means resource has been created. Okay, just pause 1 second. Okay, nice. Okay, a moment. I'll cut this part later. Okay, nice. So we need just 2 more functions, and then we will start testing them. We will do something very cool. We will insert things in the database using 3 different methods, maybe. Let's see. So update user to modify an existing user. So we have this. Let's see if this does work. So put method, we need an ID, because we want, let's say, to modify the user number 2, we need to provide the ID. Here we need to provide the ID. When we want to create a user, we don't provide the ID. We get the ID directly from the system, as we do, I don't know, if we go for a marathon, we can't choose the number we want on our chest. We go and they say, hey, you are number 12. And it's the same concept. To update, to change something, you need the ID. So this is the reason. And then the last one is to delete the user. The delete user is very similar to the get one user. So basically we want to pick a single user, but when we get when we get a single user, we just return the user. When we want to delete a single user, you see we have users ID here, but we just do this prisma.user.delete. Nice, and I think we are done. We just need maybe to start the server. Start the server. So we can do const, we can define port as environment variable. And I think that this is the best way to do this. So in case we'll use an environment variable, we'll use that one. Otherwise, we'll use 4000. For this tutorial, we will not use this environment variable, but in case you want to deploy this on another one, you can do it. But this should work. And then we can just create the service and listen into this. Okay? Nice. We are done. Okay. Before we keep going, something that we want to do is to generate the schema with Prisma. So from here we do npx, this part is important, Prisma generate. So we want to generate something, for the model. Let's see. Nice. Okay, it seems it worked. Now I want to test this. Let's try. I'm not sure it does work, but let's see. Because I want to dockerize this, but let's try without Docker. Server running on port 4000. Okay, let's just see if the service is up and running. So if we go on test here, we get this message, API is working. If I go on the browser here, localhost 4000/test, we have this message API is working. If I go on /users, I get an error. Why? So it seems something is happening here. Prisma user find many invocation. What's the problem here? The problem is that we didn't apply any. The problem is that the table is not there yet. Now we'll see this together. But before doing this, I want to dockerize the Node.js application. So let's go here, let's stop here, and let's go probably on my favorite part, which is to dockerize this backend service. Now, how can we dockerize this application? We have done this multiple times on this YouTube channel, so I will go faster here. We can just create two files, touch.dockerignore and backend.docker file. And this is something strange, because usually when we dockerize an application, we use a Docker file with a capital D. Also, I explain it like this. The problem is that here we want to have multiple Docker files in the same project. Usually when I have multiple Docker files in the same project, I don't have two files called Docker file and I just recognize them by the folder. I could do this, but I avoid doing them. In that case, I just create two files with different names, and when I build the application, I just specify a name for the file. Yes, you can create a Docker image even with a file called foobar. That's it. So let's create these two files. And the first thing is that I want to change the dockerization. So I don't want to copy the node modules of the backend inside the Docker image. I explained this multiple times in other videos. In the backend.docker file, we can dockerize this application. So we start from a base node 20 image, and then we can use a workdir, a working directory. We can copy package star.json in here, and then we can do run npm install. It's the same as you will do after you do git clone, I'll say. And then I want to copy, this part is important because you are using Prisma, so I want to copy copy the Prisma folder, Prisma, if I can type it, of course, Prisma, in another folder called Prisma, and then we can do run npx Prisma generate. We copy the rest of the files and folders here, and then we can expose the port 4000. We want this service to run on the port 4000. I choose 4000 because we'll have the front end running on the port 3000. I'm not a fan of npm run because it can create some problems on Windows. So when I can, I do node index.js. Help me, GitHub Copilot. Thank you. Okay, now we created this Docker file. Now, this has no effects. We have just written a file. To have an effect, we need to define this service in the Docker compose file. The Docker compose file will contain the three services, and we're building this, as I said, bottom up. So starting from the bottom, the database, and now we are at the backend level. So we defined a service called backend, and this can have a container name. I think backend is okay. An image, in this case backend is okay. Then we need build. Usually we have build dot in many tutorials. Here because we want to build in the same folder, here we have a compose file, but it's not at the same level as the Docker file because we have a compose file and then two folders, frontend and backend. Spoiler, we'll have a folder called frontend. The Docker file is not called Docker file, but it's called backend.dockerfile. This one is this backend Docker file. Okay, in the compose, and this is the context is basically the folder. So if you're doing this in the same folder, you will just use dot. Here we need to step into the backend folder. We need to define a port. We're almost done. Port 4000, not 8000, but 4000. And then we can define an environment variable. The environment variable is to connect this service with the database. And here, I'll just copy paste it. It's too risky. So, database URL, it's similar to what we have in Prisma, but it's not the same. PostgreSQL, Postgres, DB. This is very, very important. This DB means when you are on the same network, connect to a service, a container called DB. So this will connect this here. We are doing the networking properly in Docker. Nice, we're done. So now let's build this Docker image, and then we will run this container, and I will test it, as I said, trying to create 3 users in 3 different ways. Let's see. I never did that. So Docker compose build. First of all, let's see if I made some mistake. There are some steps here. It seems it worked. Now, I'm always skeptical when it works at the first time. Docker compose up. Okay, Docker compose up -d backend. So we want to spin this backend service. It's working. I'm impressed. Clear. Docker ps-a. No. Okay. I'll cut this part from the official video. Docker ps-a. And we have 2 services here. Okay. Now I want to try something. I want to show you something which I think it's cool. So we have this service up and running. Now let's try to step inside the database again. So let's try to do Docker. Let's try to do Docker exec to execute a command -it db. So on the db container psql -u Postgres. And let's see if I do this. I still don't have any table here, okay? Now, I want to try something. I want to run the command using containers. So now I'll try this on another tab, and I can call this docker exec -it. So on the backend service, this is basically to create the structure of our database. npx prisma migrate dev --name init. So I'm executing an npx prisma command using Docker. Let's see if this does work on the backend service. Let's see. Okay, something happened, you see. Now let's go back here on the database and then let's do again \dt. You see, this command, docker exec -it backend npx prisma migrate dev --name init, initialized the database schema, in our case creating a single table. Now, if I go on Postman and I do again localhost 4000 users, I should see, instead of an error, an empty array. And you see we have an empty array. So this is a huge difference. This does mean that now we have the schema, we have the tables. Let's try to see how many users we have here. So let's try to do select star from this table called user. Capital U because Prisma created it. It was not us. You see, 0 rows. So, but between this and not having a table, there is a difference. We created the schema. Very cool. Now, I promised you that we would have inserted 3 different users using 3 different ways. So, how can we do this? Let's go here. There is something that I really love about Prisma is this npx. I'm doing this locally. There is not Docker here. npx Prisma Studio. Let's see what is this. Let me check the chat 1 second. Okay. Yes. Everyone. Okay, so localhost 5555. Again, this has nothing to do with Docker. I'm running this locally on my machine using npx Prisma Studio. Nothing wrong. Nothing. It has nothing to do with Docker. We see this. You see, user 0. I click here. I love Prisma Studio. It's one of my favorite tools because I don't need to use table plus and other stuff. So we have this empty database. Add record. Let's create a new entry inside the database using Prisma Studio. And to remember that we use the Prisma Studio, I'll do something meta, which is I call this user from Prisma. So I used this from Prisma Studio, and the email can be from prisma@mail. By the way, there is no validation here. Okay, so here I click save. You have to hit click save. Done. Let's see if this makes sense. If I go on localhost 4000 users, we see this. So it's not the UI of Prisma. This is really inside the database now. Second way to create a user. We can use Postman to make an API call. So I have already prepared this because I made it before. So we can use a JSON with name from Postman and email from Postman email. I can use this, it's not important. So let's make this post request. Post request localhost 4000/users send. You see, id2. So we created a user also using Postman. And if I refresh here, we have the 2. If I go on Prisma Studio and I refresh, we have the 2. So we insert something inside the database using 2 different methods. Now, before we go into writing the front end, I want to do this in something that you should never do in production, but I'll do this anyway because this is a test. So first of all, here, if I do now select star from user, you see, I have the two users here, from Prisma and from Postman. Can I create a user directly from here? Don't do that. Insert, I can do this. I'll just copy paste this. I don't want to type PSQL commands. Insert into user, name, email, values from PSQL, user from PSQL mail. Let's do this. Insert one. If I try to select the users, I also see from PSQL. So I insert an user manually inside the database. If I go on Prisma Studio, I have the three users. So we created three users. One using Prisma Studio, one using Postman, one using PSQL. Now we will create a front end, and then we will make an insert in the database using the front end. And then we can consider this tutorial done. I'll take a 2 minutes break. But it's going very well. Too well. 1 hour already. If you have any question, just let me know. Prisma Studio crashes with large data, like couple. We need one more way for adding user. Prisma seed. All ideas for other tutorials. I think 3 is enough. We'll make 4, because we also use the front end now. So we will make, but it's important to understand that we can use, it's important to understand we can do the same thing in different ways. And also all these data are consistent. And we can do this depending on what we want to do. Of course, we not let our users to use Prisma Studio. So, nice. I hope you are enjoying this live stream. I'm very excited because I never did a whole full stack app in one go. So now I'll do the Next.js application. I'm very excited, super excited. This was the error, but if I do type, now I see here. Okay, what I didn't check before I keep going, I want to show you can also look for single users. It's not working. No. We can also get single users like this. So you can also get single users by /users/2 with a get request. You see, we have this. We will not do this in the front end, but of course this can be improved. Also the project will be open source, so feel free to collaborate, of course. Nice. Now it's time. So let's go back here. Okay, let's stop this. I will check again Prisma Studio at the end. Okay. Now the front end. For front end, I want to use Next.js. I'll use Next.js without Docker and then also with Docker. I'll show you that you can use it with or without Docker, your choice. So first of all, let's go back to the root level. So I'm at C workspace live full stack, or the name of your folder. And here we can do this command, npx create -next-app at latest. And I want to add an option, which is no git. Why? Because I already have Git at the root level. We have here a Git repository with 2 folders. So in this case, I don't want Next.js to create another Git repository. Never do a Git repository inside another Git repository. It's not gonna work. It's only gonna case edges. So this, and now we'll choose some options here. So which are the options? The name of the project. We'll name the project Frontend. We will use TypeScript, yes. ESLint, yes. Tailwind CSS, yes. SRC directory, yes. App router, no. I'll probably make a dedicated video to this. Import alias, no. And this usually takes 1 minute, 2 minutes. Let's see. After this, we will step inside the directory and then we will install a single dependencies. And then we will install a single dependency. We want to install Axios, which is to make HTTP requests. You can do HTTP requests in many different ways, using the fetch, Axios, other ways, the default JavaScript one. I use Axios because I'm used to it and I like it. It's very readable. So, first of all, let's step into this directory. And now let's install this dependency. I remind you that we are not in the backend now. We are in the front end creating something to have access to the backend APIs. So npm install Axios, or just I. And then we will run the application locally just to see if this does work. I also want to go in another format for the live stream, which is this one. So npm run dev. Everything is working and I'm impressed. Let's see. You can see here on the right we have a Next.js application. Let's make it a bit smaller. Okay, so we have this Next.js application just doing npm run dev. We can stop it. And now we can do something. First of all, I wanted to fix something that gave me some hedges, which is the src styles global CSS, because maybe you have a dark scheme. I want to remove this. Remove this. Otherwise, I had like white text on white labels, on white inputs. So I removed this, solved this issue. And now, in the front-end src folder, we can create a folder called components. We'll have just one component, and inside this we'll create a component called card component.tsx. I will not focus on the pattern here. I create a component called card component, and then I want to create something inside it. So import React from React, and then we can create an interface. I want to create something to show a user. I called it card because maybe I want to use it also with other projects, but this will be called card without an I. It's okay. This is just an example. It's not something that has to go in production. So ID number, name a string, and as an email a string. So we have a structure very similar to our database. Very, very similar. And now we need to create this component. I want to just do this. So const card component, and here, one moment, what's going on? Okay, here, let's close this. We can return something, and we could go with this very simple one, but I made some effort to make it look a bit better. So now you will have this. I'll explain this. So we have, okay. So we have this. You will see this very soon. It's basically just a card to display a user. You can see an ID, a name, and an email with some styling, I would say. I'm using Tailwind CSS here. I try to make it as simple as possible. If it is not a Tailwind CSS crash course, but I really enjoy Tailwind CSS. You can also let me know what you think about Tailwind CSS in the comments, and then I'll read it soon. And then we need to export this card component. We want to use this card component inside the main component. We are almost done. I just have to go in the source pages index.tsx, remove everything. We need to write this index.tsx file from scratch again. So first of all, we need to make some imports. We need to import React, useState, useEffect, Axios, and the card component. That's it. Then we need to create an interface. Here I want to call it user, a bit different, and then we can export this this function. Export default function. I want to close it because I want to don't have errors here. I will not follow what GitHub Copilot is saying here. Here it's going a bit crazy. But let's go line by line. So first of all, we need to define an API URL because maybe this service has been deployed somewhere. We need to know where this service is. For this case, we'll just use this with this environment variable or the HTTP localhost 4000. So this will work. And then we need to define something to handle the state, basically. So one is the users and set users to display the users on the UI. And then we need two more. We need the new user, set new user. This is to handle the new user when we create them. We will see a form to add a new user, and another one for the update user. We'll have a simple UI with like create, update, and then we'll have the list of the users. And now things are getting very interesting because now we want to fetch these users. So to fetch the users, I want to copy this part, but I'll explain, no worries. So we can do this. So use effect. So we call this, we have this use effect to fetch the data. So, and you see, check this line, axios.get API URL / user. So this is the same of hitting a get endpoint on localhost 4000 / users. So then we get a list of users. Maybe you saw something interesting here, this reverse. So I wanted to add this reverse because when I display the users, I want to have the newest users on top, because always it's annoying when I create a tutorial and I create a new user and it's at the bottom. I want the last ones to be showed at the beginning. And this is, for example, a UI feature that I really love. Otherwise, we can just return an error. Here we are, you see here we are using the state set users, and we can call this fetch data function. Okay, now I want to do this project by steps. So instead of writing the whole project, I want to go step by step and see how the project will show up here on the right. Okay, so we need we have the function. We need to add basically the UI, the HTML part, HTML-ish part. So here we can return this, basically. I want first of all to return, I think this is correct. Yes, I want to return this part. Let's start without even fetching the data. So one moment. What happened here? Okay, so is this correct? I think it is. Yes, because we need to add this. And we need, of course, to close it. /div. Soon this will become easier to understand. Div and main. GitHub Copilot is not working. Okay, so I want to do again npm run dev and see if this is working. Okay, let's see. Okay, can you see here we have this user management hub. I don't know if you can see it because it's in the middle. But we have basically a simple UI. So now we are returning just this, and now our application will come alive. And to do this, so we position here. And now here we can show the list of the users. And I don't trust GitHub Copilot here. I want to display the users. So display the users, just like this. And I want to copy just this part. I think that, let's see, 1 moment, div, okay, I think this goes here, sorry, X, so this is the div, of course, this div goes here, and now we can get this part. So let's copy paste this part. Basically, we are copying the part that uses the interface of the user. And check here on the right. So let's slow down and let's see what happened here. So we have this div with a class name space y2. This is all Tailwind stuff. But basically, check here. We are mapping the users and we are having some styling here. And we have this error here, we'll see why, and then we have basically showing the card component with the card user. If why is this showing an error? Because we don't have the delete user function yet, you can see here. So let me remove this, but check this out. Like you see here, you recognize, those are the users we already inserted. So we are already fetching the backend because the container of the backend is still up and running. Let's try to create a new user. Let's call it like, I don't know, test2. Let's call this user test2, test2 email. Okay, let's make a post request. Let's remove this because it can be confusing. No, I can't remove it. Let's make a post request with this, send. No. Let's make another HTTP request post on localhost 4000/users with another name, for example, test2, and test2 email as email. Let's make this post request, ID 4. Nothing changed here, so the UI didn't update automatically because it doesn't know, but if I refresh, I have the new user. So this does mean that the front end is already connected with the data, with the backend. Super, super cool. And now the cool part, which is to create a user using this front end. We'll do this right now. So let's put this below here. We can create a new user. We are very close to the end. So to create a user, okay, we need to define a function. So let me grab the function and explain it. So this is the function. So create user. It's an asynchronous function. The prevent default is to prevent the default behavior of the browser. And then we see, check here, Axios post API/users. This is exactly what happens when I make a request with Postman. It also sets the users on the UI, and after we hit the set new user, it refreshes the fields. Okay, so but this is just the function. This is not the interface. So let's scroll a bit down and let's create the interface. I want to just reformat so it looks better. So let's just create the user. So here, to create the user, what do we need? We need a form, 2 inputs, and a button. Okay, not super complicated, but we are doing this now. So to create this user, let's create these fields. I also used a different color, so maybe it will be easier to understand. So to add a new user, let's start by creating a form. Check here at the top right of the application. So this is a form with some styling with the Tailwind. You see this light blue line? Check what happens now. I copy now the input field for the name. I'm inside this form. And here I have now, I can type a name. You see, input with a placeholder, value, on change, it's updated, and then we have some nice styling. Below this, of course, we have the email. So it's a very similar one. Here, let me format. You see, check here at the top right. We're doing this live with the backend alive. Let's see if I can create a new user. Let's see if I can create a new user without even to restart this application. Let's see. It's challenging, but maybe it's doable. And then below this, we can add a button, which is basically to submit. Check this out. User Management App. We have this list of users. Now, what would happen if I created this while the backend it was up and running. No, let's try to do this test. So let's call it like Frontend 1, okay? And now let's call it like Frontend mail, okay? So I just created this UI. Let's add the user. You see, we already have the new user. If I go on here and I refresh the users, it's not reversed, but you can see the front-end email. So I'm already adding the users inside the database, with the database up and running here. That's super cool. Of course, we'll stop this service and we'll dockerize it after, but I'm doing this like live with this. Think like about creating this with a production service. Okay, now let's go with the update and then we are basically done. So I want to create a new function which is the handle. Moment, let me find it. Okay, so to update the user, we can go here at the top, and after create user, we can. Let me do this. We can update the user. So here we have the logic of the front end. I don't trust GitHub Copilot. I trust more what I did before. So I'll copy and then we will explain, of course. No worries. The idea is to explain, but also don't make it super long, the video. So we can handle this updated user, and let's check the important parts. Here we prevent the default behavior. We make an put request with Axios here, and we see, wait. And here we also have to give an ID, because we want to update the user by providing an ID. And after this, once we update the users, we also want to show the different user on the front end. So we created this, and it's otherwise we'll also return the user. What we will, in case of error, will log an error. We go here at the bottom, and now here we can update the user. We want another field or form. We want another form to let us update the user. We need 4 fields in this case. So again, I'll start with a form. So we'll start seeing this alive. Okay, you see there is this green line. This is just the form. Now let's add the input here. It's very similar to the create, by the way, all the code will be available, of course. So we can add the user ID here, and then we just need to add the and then we just need to add the name. You see, I'm typing this like live, and then of course the new email. Of course, we also need a button. So let's see if we can modify a user like this on the fly, I would say. You see here, you should be able to see, maybe like this. You see we have this UI, and we can define a user and we can modify it. So let's try to this now. So we have this. I also want to double check with another something else. So you see we have this ID5 frontend 1 frontend email. So let's change it. So the user with an ID5 now we can be modified, the capital, And the email, you can say new email, okay? There is no validation here. Update the user. Let's check this. And you can see that we have modified the user here. Let's check it from here. Refresh. And it's modified. Very cool. Last step is to delete the user. So we need to create a function here. So delete user. And this is very simple. It should, I don't know if I should trust GitHub Copilot, but I will not. Here we have this delete user function, which is an asynchronous function that needs an ID. We need the ID of the user to delete. We make an Axios delete HTTP request on the API URL /users/ID, and we set the new user. So basically, also deleted from the UI, not just from the UI. So it's also deleted from the database and not just the UI. Do you remember that at the beginning of this front-end part, we commented these 3 lines? Let's try to uncomment them, and let's see what happens here. So I uncomment this, and you see that on each card, on each user, there is this delete button that now the error went away. So maybe now we can click on this delete user, but this is not an UI thing. This will be deleted from the database. For example, we have this ID for test2 email. Let's pretend that this was really a test. You can see it from here, ID for test2 email. Here. Let's try to delete it from the UI. So let's click here. Okay. And you see that the user is gone. We made an HTTP delete request, and this user has been deleted. It's not just a UI thing, but we deleted this from the database. And this is very cool. It's very, very cool. Nice. Now, if you want to deploy this application with Vercel, maybe you are good to go, because you can deploy this Next.js app with Vercel. We connect this to the database. Of course, you need to just fine-tune the API URL, but you are basically done. But since I am a Docker fan, I want to do something a bit strange, I would say. I want to also Dockerize the Next.js application. I'll be fast here because I already made a whole video on how to Dockerize a Next.js application, but before doing that, I want to stop the Next app. So I want to stop this, and now I'll show you the steps, fast because I already made a whole video on this, on how to Dockerize this Next.js application. So I am in the next.config.js file, and here I want to define as an output standalone. This is a way to deploy Next.js not with Vercel. So basically, Next.js, Vercel tells us, okay, do whatever you want. The code is yours, because a Next.js app is a JavaScript app. We can create now a .dockerignore and front-end Docker file. So we can do this here, touch .dockerignore Docker file, no, front-end .docker file. Am I in the right folder? Hope so. So the front-end part, we should have this .dockerignore and then this front-end .docker file, that now they are empty. First thing first, I want to add these node modules even in the dockerignore on the front-end. I remind you that we are using JavaScript on the front-end and on the back-end too. So we need to ignore the node modules on both the dockerignore files, not just the back-end one. On the now something super cool. On the front-end part, I want to use the default Docker file of Next.js. I have already it prepared, but I'll show you after copying it. So I'll show you here. Let me show this here. So did you know that Vercel, Docker, Next app, they have an official version of official Docker version of Vercel. So let's see if I can find it, because it's a bit hidden. Docker container. Okay. So there is this repository on the official Vercel account that has a Docker file. So we'll not invent anything. We'll just copy-paste this part inside our Docker file. We are Dockerizing the Next.js application in the same way the Vercel team will do it. Okay? I have it here, but it's the same of the website. So this is the front-end Docker file. So I have the same Docker file that is on the official Vercel/Next Docker something, Docker clone example, okay? So this Docker file was easy. I didn't write it. Now we need to define this service on the Docker Compose. We are writing this service bottom up. So let's type here front-end. And I think it's almost correct. No. Container name front-end. The image we want to build, it's okay front-end for this example. The build as a context, the front-end folder, and as the Docker file front-end.dockerfile. Ports 3000. Nice. Environment variable, I want to to use this next public API URL. This is basically to use this. You can change it, for example, if you deploy this somewhere else. As a restart policy, we can use always. Depends on is just to wait another container to start before this. Parentheses, this doesn't guarantee that your app will also be run later. But at least the container will run later. I'm not going to the details of this, but let's say this is, that's it. I think we are done. So now just 2 more steps, and then maybe we are done with these 3 services live stream. So Docker, Compose, build. So we are building the Next.js application. Let's see. It's going incredibly well. Was not expecting this. Now I should not ever say this. I'll cut this part, and so soon we'll also have a Q&A session. So stick with me. I'll also give some memberships now. Yes, Produm. Cool. It's taking a while to build, but it's nice. Let's see. After this, we just have to do Docker Compose up. And then maybe we are done. If this application will be up and running after this, we are done. It's taking some time, but I think it's also because we are building this. We are not doing just npm run dev. So sometimes when I just want to test a Next.js dockerization, I just do npm run dev in the Docker file. This is a production ready Docker file with some multi-stage build and so on. It seems it worked. So now if I do Docker compose app -d frontend, will it work or not? Let's see. Bam. Done. Refresh. It's worked. So now this is running inside a Docker container. We Dockerize a Next.js application, and we are using this with a Docker container. Now we can go here. So maybe it's easier to see. Let's go here. we can make a recap. So the first thing is that I want to create a user using this dockerized Next.js application. We don't know if this works. Next docker email, next docker at mail. Let's add this user. Let's see if this does work. Bam, it worked. Like a charm, it worked. Nice. I can also update any user, for example, the ID 5, no, the ID 3, I will say. I can call it Francesco, an email, subscribe. This is not an email. Okay, ID 3. Let's see if this does work. It worked, and also the UI has refreshed. Super cool. Very, very good. I think I'm done. I'm surprised everything worked. What's wrong with me?